COVID is now we know that it can happen, and I don't think we'll ever go back to the way we were prior to COVID, right? I think it's opened a lot of avenues for people with disabilities, and it's really, I feel like, has been a big transition and lesson for institutions, including APU. I remember when I first got here having to approve a student for remote learning prior to COVID. Oh my God, it was such a huge deal. All the pushback I got from faculty, and as soon as people, able-bodied people, needed something to happen, right, which was to go remote, we made it happen in a matter of a week. People with disabilities had for a long time, students with disabilities, been asking for remote access as an option, right? It was frowned upon. It was not like, in the past, all universities, the majority of students, the largest proportion of students they had were students with learning disabilities. Now they're students with mental health disabilities. So what that tells me is that now we're normalizing the conversation around mental health, and that students feel more comfortable and are more apt to request or look for services on campus at the counseling center, at our office. And it's not, I think the stigma will never go away, but I feel like it's become a little bit more normal, right? And now students are reaching out and asking for help. I think some of the challenges too are around, there's more people of color applying for colleges and universities, right? Community colleges and universities. And it's about how do universities serve students of color well, right? Because we know that students of color have different needs, right, than some of our more privileged students on campus or on college campuses. So really trying to figure out how do we retain those students. So what we saw during COVID was that we lost a lot of those students, right? No access to the internet, no access to support services. They didn't have the privacy that they needed to be in an online, to take classes online, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that I'm hoping that there will be, I feel like there's now more awareness around the needs of students of color, right? And from various socioeconomic statuses around how to better serve those students and how to retain them. Student affairs is such an important part of the campus structure, and people always think, oh, academics, it's so important, GPA, good grades, right? Of course it's important, but it's only one part of the student experience on any campus. And student affairs really offers this these services, right, that are also important, like campus life, things like the clubs, right, like veteran and military services. There are all these other services, right, that support students to help keep them connected and help them feel a sense of belonging while they're on college campuses. Because if students don't feel connected to the campus or like they don't belong, then they're not gonna, it doesn't matter how, it's gonna affect their grades, or no matter how good they do, they might not choose to not stay because they're not having this other experience, right? And so I feel like that's extremely important. I think for our students with disabilities, it's very important, right? Because so many of our students are already coming maybe from a place where they've experienced discrimination, maybe haven't always felt like they belonged or felt like outsiders for whatever reason, right? So I think coming to campus and finding places where you can go, right? And I feel like for us, my goal is one of inclusive excellence, right, for the university and for all of our students, where they feel like they're welcomed anywhere that they are on campus, right? That they feel like they can, that they belong here. And so I feel like that's really important. So I think there's a lot of talk around budgets. They're getting ready, and because they've told us, right, that they're going to right size, which is the more PC term than saying downsize, right? Which means they'll be cutting jobs, they'll be collapsing jobs and titles and stuff like that. What we saw last semester was that there was a lot of changes in the faculty and academic departments, where you had department directors and chairs, and then all of a sudden the director was gone, and then it was just the chair doing the director's job and their job, right? So what we see is now we see less people doing more work, right? And not necessarily for more money or more compensation. So I feel like there's an expectation that we do more with less, right? Or with the same amount of resources. So yeah, I just feel like we're in a difficult position right now. I think the university is, and they've acknowledged it and said it publicly, right? And are really looking to find ways to bring in more money, bring in more donors, figure out what they're going to do in terms of, because we need money to serve students, right? And we need students to bring in the money. So I think the number one thing I would advocate for is universal design of instruction and learning for our students, because I feel like if that was actually really implemented across the board, right? Like where it wasn't an ask, but it was an expectation of all faculty on campus, I think our students would have less of a need for our department, right, than they do now, and they'd have greater access to academics. And not only would it be better for them, but it would be better for all students, right? So I think that would definitely be one of the things that I would reimagine for the university. I think the other thing I would imagine for the university is we're a Hispanic serving institution, but we're only one on paper. We don't do a whole lot, right, otherwise. And I think for me, that's a really difficult pill to swallow. And since I've been here, we've advocated I'm the co-chair of the Latinx Faculty, Staff, and Administrator Association. And we've shared governance, so it's me and Christine Guzman, who's the coordinator of Title IX. And it's been difficult. Like, we advocated for Dia de los Muertos events, and it got shut down by the interim president, right? Because they thought it was too controversial, and they had all these terms for it, and there was all these misconceptions. And it didn't even matter that we had done a proposal and had put in, like, explained what it was, right, and what it meant and what it wasn't, and even had like a Latina theologian from APU who put in the piece around like theology and like why it's not something like evil or like, you know what I mean? Because I think the perception is, and it didn't matter because people's perceptions were already fixed or are already fixed now. So it didn't really matter what we proposed, they just shot it down. And I just don't see a lot of cultural events happening on campus or celebrations around culture. And I think being an HSI is a big deal, right? And I feel that it's a disservice to our students and our campus community when we know when we're claiming to be an HSI because we are on paper and we're receiving funding for it, but then what are we doing with it?